excuse me. I'm also going to share my screen, so I'll do that just now, and then we can get into the materials for today. And bear with me a second while I pull up the chat box. So as I say, an informal session. If you have any questions or thoughts as I'm going through the materials and the models I want to share with you, feel free to put them in the chat box. I will try and spot them as I go through. If I don't, or if I think it's something I'm going to cover in the next bit, I'll hang on to it. But if for any reason anything gets missed, we will get into that at the end, and I'll make sure we cover all of the questions that you guys have got. So I'm going to use a bit of software today. Oops, wrong thing. Called Menti. Some of you might have used Menti before, some of you might not. So if you're using your phone for this, you can just scan that QR code and that'll bring up Menti on your phone. If you're on PC or laptop, if you're going to go to menti.com and put in the code that's at the top of the screen there, what that will do, it's all anonymous, so you don't have to worry about any comments. He says nervously, having done quite a bit of work with students and seen some of the anonymous comments you get on that platform. But it is anonymous, so it's here for you to answer a few questions that I'm going to throw your way and to get your feedback and get your perspective. When we look at any topic, but in particular something like change, what's really valuable is if we can anchor that change in your personal experience and the things that you've been through, and that makes it more valuable from your perspective, because it will stick. You'll relate to it in a better way, in a deeper way, and it'll be more useful going forward. So that's why we're going to use Menti. And I've just got a couple of slides that I want to run through and get your reaction to. Now, this first question, I'm deliberately not putting a context on this, and yet I appreciate that any change is going to be contextualized. It's going to be situational to what that change is or what you're facing at that point. But we have an instinctive and a personal reaction to change. So if I were to say to you, it's a big change coming on Monday morning, you don't know what it is, but you just know it's going to be a big change, things are going to be different. What's your instinctive reaction? So using Menti, and this is where I talk slowly because it's a bit like the old school satellite links, so there's a delay between me saying things and your answers coming through. What would be your reaction? You get up to 5 words each here. So what would your reactions be to change when you don't know what it is, but you just know it's going to be something big? There's a big change coming down the tracks for you. Fantastic. So already we're starting to see optimism, panic, curiosity. So quite a mix. And it is, I mean, it's, some of us have a positive appetite for change, and we kind of seek out challenges and we welcome things. Some of us like to work in a more steady, stable, predictable kind of way. And this is something we'll talk about, I think, with the order. I think actually the next webinar, we're looking at the DISC model. And so we're looking at operating styles, and that gives us an insight into some of this stuff as to why some of us like change, why some of us like to work in that way, why some of us are more cautious and like to operate in a more steady, stable, predictable way. So a range of different approaches. Why is a great one. Not enough people ask why it's coming. And it's an interesting topic to be looking at just now, given the amount of change that we're seeing on the UK political stage at the moment, and we'll be checking and reference some of that as we look at the models. So there is a difference. We react instinctively to change, and we all tend to have a default level of comfort in relation to change, even if it's something we really want to see. If it's going to shake things up, and our preference is to work in a stable, steady way, there's still going to be that nervousness and anxiety. And on the flip side, if we're the kind of person that likes change and likes things to be different and finds it exciting and stimulating, then even if it's something that you're really unsure about, you'll still be quite looking forward to it and quite keen to see it happening. So it's interesting to see that on a personal level. And it's interesting to recognize that as well in the people that we work with and the people that we're supporting when we're going through a change process and we're seeing through a change process. So change can come in a couple of different ways. It can be chosen or it can be imposed. Oh, bear with me. I set that slide up in 2 different ways. I wasn't sure how we're going to use. I decided to go with the word cloud. I'll delete that one, don't worry. I should say as well, so you'll get copies of all of the slides from today, and including, because we're using Menti, all of your responses and your comments, all of this gets downloaded as well. So you get not just the slides that I'm reading. So I want to think about change in 2 different perspectives. So firstly, to think about change where it's a change that you've chosen. So a change that you've wanted to see, wanted to embark on. It might be on a professional level, maybe a new job, a new role, a new organization, new city, going self-employed, stepping out of being within organizations. It might be on a personal level, moving house, great example. Fitness, looking after your well-being, any kind of changes that we've chosen, we want to see, and we've decided that we want to put in place for ourselves. Some huge ones there. Fantastic. So what I'm going to do is, as we work through the models, I'm going to try and pick out some of the changes that you guys have highlighted, and try and relate those models to the changes that you're bringing up. So that's great. So that gives us a check-in and a bit of a thought process around changes that we've chosen, changes that we want to see, that we want to happen for ourselves. But not all change, as we know all too well, is chosen. There are times when we haven't chosen the change, and that it happens and we are reacting to it. So we can get some examples from the guys on the call today around changes that you've had to react to. And I know I've got a few colleagues on the call today who we've been in organizations when we've experienced change, and there's been restructures and reorganizations, quite seismic changes. So the kind of things that we haven't chosen, but we just have to react to. Big stuff so far. I think we can probably all relate to most of these that are coming up so far. So big things, well, apart from the speed bike accident, that's the one I've been through. But yeah, things that we can't anticipate, things that sometimes come out of the blue, sometimes don't, sometimes are anticipated, but it's not something that we've necessarily been seeking out, but it's come our way, and then we need to react to it. So thanks a lot. So that's really valuable. That's really useful from my perspective, and I'll try and key things into that as we go through the models I want to talk you guys through today. So I've got 2 models I want to look at. One is, I believe, more focused on change that we choose, that chosen change. One that's more around change that's imposed. Often the chosen change is positive because it's something we want to see. Often, not always, but often the change that's imposed upon us, we see as negative, and we adapt to it, or we have to find the opportunity within it. So we need to see where we're going to take it. And in that respect, people talk about the change curve, but actually there isn't a change curve. We need 2 at least in order to analyze and to understand the process that we're going through. So if it's a positive change, if it's a change that we've chosen, something that we wanted to see, then I think this is the most appropriate curve that helps us understand that. So this is the Darrell O'Connor change curve. And we start out here with uninformed optimism. So someone talked about, starting a new job, and we looked at that as one of the opportunities. So we've all seen this, we can relate to that. We've started a new job. We've seen it perhaps from the outside. We've seen others taking on that job, and we think, yep, I can definitely do that. How hard can it be? I will give it a go. And then we get started and we realize that, oh, okay, maybe it's a wee bit tougher than I thought. There's a bit of challenge in here that I hadn't anticipated, I hadn't expected. And we get to that point of informed pessimism. So by that stage, we know, when we start out, we don't know what we don't know. Then we get to a point where we do know what we don't know, and we start to appreciate perhaps the scale of the challenge, the scale of the opportunity, the scale of things that we need to know, we need to understand. And that gives us a tipping point. At that stage, we can perhaps check out and think, no, actually, I've made the wrong choice. This wasn't the job for me. This wasn't the opportunity for me. Or we drive through. And when we drive through, we get to that point of hopeful realism, which I think, actually, maybe I can make a go of this. Maybe this is the right environment for me, the right role for me. Maybe I can see a way forward through this particular change. And as we drive on, we get to that point of informed optimism, where we think, yeah, actually, no, 6 months in now, I'm getting there. I recognize that I think I can do this. I think this is going to work for me. I think I've got the skills, I've got the aptitude. I can see how much I've learned. This is going to work for me. And we get to that point of completion. We think about the recent political changes that have come in. I can see perhaps Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng coming in with uninformed optimism. How hard can this be? We've got some great ideas. Everybody else for the last 50 years has got the economy wrong. We know exactly what we're doing. We're going to make a go of this. And I think when they say, and they got the reaction, I think that informed pessimism probably bit pretty quickly. And then to that point of checking out, okay, so, ambition meets reality. We get that cold, hard slap in the face. Is this right? Is this going to work for us? And we have to make those evaluations. We have to make those assessments about whether we're in the right position, whether we're making the right approach, whether it's going to work. Sometimes it's the right thing to drive through and press on. Sometimes it's the right thing to check out. But we can move through. And I think that kind of gives us an interesting way to link in to the other curve that I want to look at. And this is certainly a lot of traditional change management has used the other curve to look at a change process. And the other way of looking at it is that Kubler-Ross change curve. And this is more useful to look at a change that's been imposed. It's the curve that's used to explain the change process. It's also the curve that's used to explain the grief process. And I know somebody put up the death of a family member as one of those imposed changes. And there's no surprise that these two curves are co-determinate, because if we think about it, if it's something that we valued, if it's something we wanted to see continued, and that's changed and that's stopped, then okay, there might be an opportunity as a result of this change, but we've also lost something. So there's a loss there, there's that loss process. So when that hits us, we move through the kind of stages that we're probably familiar with. So initially, that's shock and denial. And again, if we stick with our political example, when the market spoke, then I think Truss and Kwarteng were probably in that kind of shock and denial process. They don't understand it. We've got the answers. How can people not understand that we've got the solutions to make things work? I think quite quickly moving to anger at that point. I think certainly Kwasi Kwarteng, when he got his marching orders, will have got to that stage. And I think certainly Liz Truss, when not just the markets, but the party turned against her. You can imagine, went through that process and looking at the interviews that she did most recently, didn't look in a happy place on a personal level. So certainly at that kind of low point. And it takes a time to move through to that point of acceptance. And these things that it's a process we can all recognize. We've all been through it in different stages and different guises. And there's 3 points really that I want to make about these curves before we look at how they can be useful. I think point number 1 is that it's not a linear process. So if we think again around that curve here, if we've probably been in a situation where we think things are okay, we've taken on a new challenge, or informed optimism. Let's switch it from our ex-prime minister or our soon-to-be ex-prime minister to our new prime minister. Let's about Rishi Sunak. He might be sitting at uninformed optimism just now. He's not held this job before. He thinks he's going to make a go of it. He's not quite sure. Maybe he's at hopeful realism. Maybe, well, he's held one of the major offices. He knows what that kind of political life is going to look like for himself. He's pretty sure that he knows what he's doing. He's pretty sure he can make this work for himself. You can imagine being hit with a challenge down the line. We don't know how the membership's going to react. He may well get bumped from that point of hopeful realism back to informed pessimism. Actually, no, I can't bring the party with me. I can't unite the party. This is going to be more difficult than I thought it was going to be. So it's not a simple linear process on either of these curves that we move through them. I think, great, tick. I've got past informed pessimism. I'm now hopefully, I've got hopeful realism. I'm at that stage and I'm not going to slide backwards. We move backwards and forwards on these curves all the time, depending on the circumstances and depending on the issues that get thrown at us. So that's the first stage. Well, the first point I want to make is to appreciate that it's not a linear process. It's not a simple, straightforward process. The second point is around the pace that we go through these curves and these changes. So I know I've certainly been in organizations and working with organizations that have been experiencing a major change, a big, dramatic shift in the organization, and the speed at which people are moving through this curve, moving past that shock and denial, processing the anger, going through that low point of being unhappy with the situation and getting to the stage of acceptance. Some people move through that and process that quite quickly. Some people, it is a really slow process for them to get to that point. Some people never get to that stage. So the speed at which we move through that process varies hugely. It varies for us on a personal level, and it varies for the people that we're supporting and the teams that we're a part of, and understanding and appreciating that it may well be that we're all working, our team is working through it and we'll get there. But we go as fast as the pace of our slowest member. So actually we need to, if we're going to bring everybody with us, this is the pace that's going to be appropriate for us to process and drive forward this particular change if we want to bring everybody with us. So pace is a big part of that. And the third point is that I don't think, my belief is that these curves are not mutually exclusive. So it's not that, okay, this is a change that I want to see, so I'm on this positive curve and I'll drive my way through. And again, if we think about got to the point of informed pessimism and then checked out, and when the markets and the party turned against her and jumped from this kind of positive change curve to this negative change curve and gone into shock, denial, anger, and started working through that one. So in that sense, I think it's more of a wave than a curve, if that makes sense. And I think we, depending on the change, depending on where we are, depending on how it's impacting on us, on a personal level, on a professional level, that will inform which curve is most appropriate to us and where we are on those curves. And that's where I take slight issue with the with the kind of positive curve, because I don't think we ever really get to a point of completion. There's always change happening, and even if we think something's finished, it's just then becomes a step on the road to the next change or the next challenge or the next issue that's coming down the tracks for us. So I do think it's something that's continual, and this is where I think the value of these models comes into play, because the way that we can use them for ourselves or for our organizations or for our teams or the people that we're supporting is, if it's never ending, then we can use this to help people identify, where are you in relation to the change that's happening just now? What's your position? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Where would you put yourself on either of these change curves? And this is where they can be valuable in stage one to help people identify, am I feeling okay about this or am I not? Am I positive about this change or am I not? And if we can help to, if we identify where we are on one of these curves, then actually that can be a bit of a light bulb moment and an insight for people to realize, actually, no, I thought I was okay with this, but no, actually I'm there on that curve. So actually I'm not okay with this just now. And this is something that I need to work on, and it's something I need to understand in a bit more detail. So it can help us identify and help others identify where they are in a change process or facing a particular change or a particular challenge. identifying where we are gives us an option to identify where we want to get to. It helps us understand our starting point. It doesn't predict where we're going to go. It doesn't predict where we'll get to. It's not a predictor of the future, but it helps us to analyze and understand our starting point so we can start to think about where we want to get to and what that progression is likely to look like. And that brings me on to the third model. So 3 models today, bonus edition, 3 models that I wanted to share today. And this is the third one. So having talked about the fact that a model gives us a lens and a language, and I've already seen a few wry smiles as I've brought with teams, and for a number of different reasons. Challenge that we're taking on as a team, as an organization. We all know how we react to those changes, and that those reactions are variable. So sometimes we react to a change and we are cargo. It's never going to work. I've seen this 3 times before already. Yeah, you can't tell me. I know how this plays out. It's just hopeless. I don't know why we're tackling it this way again. So we're kind of dragging our heels. It's that cynicism, it's that pessimism. You know, we don't believe it's the right thing to do. We don't believe it's going to work. Beyond that, almost a more extreme level from that is that kind of pirate position. Yeah, it's not going to work, and I'm going to stop it. I don't believe this is the right thing to do, and we're taking pot shots at the process. We're trying to derail it. We don't believe it's the right thing to do. We don't think it's going to be right for us or for the organization, and so, or for our service users or for the product that we're putting out. And so we try and stop it. We try and impede that change process. We then sometimes have that passenger position. Yeah, it might work, but I'm not convinced. So I'll just keep my head down. I'll let this run out for a week or 2 or for a month or so. I'll see what happens, and then yeah, maybe I'll get on board. Maybe I'll see where it's going to go for me. And we've all been in the position where we've been the ones trying to make the change work, and we've been rolling up our sleeves and we've been trying to drive it forward, and we've been getting frustrated at everybody that's taking the sort of different positions and aren't part of the crew and aren't helping us make that change happen. Now, a couple of points on this model. Firstly, we're not making value judgments here. So there will be issues, there will be changes where actually taking that pirate position is absolutely the right thing to do. If we believe it's morally wrong or legally wrong, or it's kind of a point of principle, then we might believe that this is something we have to resist. For the purposes of today's webinar, and for the purposes of using this model in our teams and in our organizations, we'll work from the assumption that this is a logical change. It's a change that's been through due diligence, due process. It's been assessed as the right strategic direction for the organization or for the team. So it's a change that we want to see happen. What this model then does, it gives us that lens to look at, well, in terms of that change, how are people react? How am I reacting, first of all? Am I happy with this change? Am I crew? Am I driving this forward? Or actually, am I being a bit cynical? Am I dragging it back? Am I slowing it down? What's my response to this? So we can understand where we are and the response that we're taking towards a change. It also helps us to help others understand in a change process and what response they're taking to change. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is move people into that crew position. So again, it gives us that language and it helps us depersonalize. So we can sit down with a team member and say, right, okay, so you don't seem particularly on board with this, to stretch the analogy. You don't seem particularly happy about this change that's happening. The actions, the behaviors, the stance that you're taking seems to be a kind of cargo position. You kind of seem to be dragging it down, or you seem to be a sort of almost a pirate position. You're actively trying to block this change. What is it about the change that's not working for you? What do you object to? What's the issues that you've got? And how can we move you into a crew position? And so it changes that conversation from, I don't like what you're doing. What you're doing is objectionable. What you're doing is obstructive. And it changes it into, how do we move you into a positive crew position? Now, if someone's kind of a passenger or cargo and isn't quite convinced, that might be reasonable. We might be able to move people into that crew position. If someone's taking a more extreme reaction to a particular change and they're in that pirate position and they're really not believing that this is the right thing to do, then it's maybe too much of a jump to get them into crew. But we could have the conversation around, okay, maybe that's too much for you just now. How can I get you to be a passenger for the next month or so? Can I get you just, okay, stop. If we can move from trying to stop this to just giving it a chance, giving it 4 weeks, 6 weeks, let's revisit at that point and hold off the guns, hold off the kind of sniping, and let's give us a chance to embed this next element, and then let's review it at that stage. So it's a way to discuss it and view a change process by depersonalizing the elements for people involved. Now, bear with me a second, just need to check something. So that's one of the key, as I said, the key things for me in terms of these models is that it needs to be tailored. So as we can see from that, the change curves, it'll depend on the organization, it'll depend on your circumstances, depend on the team that you're supporting or that you're part of, as to how they're working through a particular challenge or a particular change. And then this helps us to look at our responses to that. And the other reason why I particularly like this model is, and the reason why a number of you smiled when I brought it up, is that we can all recognize ourselves in this. So yeah, we can all recognize when other people have taken these positions to a challenge, but we can all recognize when we've done it as well. And I know I'm not expecting to anyone dive into this when we're all talking together, but I know that if I spoke to each of you individually and we talked about that, we would all find an instance where we've all been in each of these positions in response to change. So the value is to use this to help us analyze where we are, where we want to get to, and how we can start to make some of those incremental changes in order to move us on in that change process. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen at that point, purely because there's other stuff I can share with you guys, but I'm interested to hear from you in terms of your experiences of change. Which one of those curves is most predominant when you think about change? Do you think about positive change or negative? What's been your experience of it? And how have you managed to support other people through that process?
I'm just stuck on the pirates, Dave. Ever since you've said pirates, now I'm like fixated on the pirates. Stephanie's got her hand up.
Hi, Steph.
Hi. Yeah, I would say actually, yeah, it's really interesting to see the positive change curve. Thank you. I would say from being in-house, it's definitely more of the negative curve, but to moving to owning my own company where you've got more control, more of the positive change. So I think where you've got more control, yeah, there's a difference there. Was a reflection I had. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's interesting you talk about control. So as I say, I'm taking snippets out of some of the training that I've got. And that's the next thing that we look at in this particular piece of training is we look at comfort zones and we look at control. And I think you're absolutely right. Where we've got agency, where we feel we've got some control over the outcome of a change, then we feel more positively disposed towards it. I think a lot of the challenge that I've seen in working with organizations is how to support people to feel that they have an element of control and how they can focus on, we talk about that circle of control where there's the things that I can actually do that will make a difference. And then we've got that circle of concern on the outside where I'm worried about all this stuff, but there's absolutely nothing that I do will have any impact on this. So how do we help people to get into that circle of control and focus on the things that they can do that will make them feel more comfortable about it, because they've got some control over that. And then I'm telling you, Steph, I know you'll know well, the more people focus on that circle of control, the bigger that circle becomes, because they've got the more influence they have then on things beyond that immediate small circle. But no, control is an absolutely critical element. Amy.
Hello. I just was enjoying the ship, actually. That was my that's just my reflection really on. I mean, the three examples are really helpful, but the ship one was definitely, as you were speaking, I was like, oh yeah, I've been on that ship, but in the different roles, more latterly, as you know, because we've worked together as sort of the captain on this ship, going, we need to we need to drive this ship, and all the other people on the boat are not, well, we're coming, but quite slowly, and you're sort of driving it into a massive ice. Well, you're going, we need to get these decisions made quite quickly. So what was interesting was the speed with which maybe you need to get through that curve maybe differs depending on the challenge that you're facing, because sometimes you don't have an awful lot of time given what's maybe happening around you in an organization, or big changes needed to happen really quickly in order to keep something maybe even afloat. So I was really interested in those two, but particularly that one. But I suppose from my perspective to ask you is, when do you do the, okay, I'm getting off, the other curve where there's the exit strategy. So it's just more, how much time would you give on that boat trying to get all those people on before you do the exit one?
It's a great question, and it's one of those unanswerable questions, as you know. So Amy recently went through a huge change with her organization, and drove through a significant change, and there was bringing the board on that journey was a real challenge. And I think it's a tough one, because there does come a point where, and this is where models and training meets reality, it helps us. It gives us a way for us all to establish that common understanding. And this is the same with any kind of organizational challenge, is that we need everyone to be on the same page and to want the same things in order for us to all pull in the same direction. Ultimately, if we have people who are not on the ship, who don't want to go in the direction that we're going in, then we get to a crunch point where we need to address that. If we can get everybody onto the ship, so we can use the change models to help people understand where are they in this process of change. They need to accept that the process is necessary, and that can be a challenge. And when you say, there's needed, and if we can get them to buy in, then we need them to understand which change, which curve they're on, what their challenges are, and then what reaction they're taking, and how we can get them to buy in and move across to that kind of crew position. But as I was saying, you may have a point where some people are absolutely locked in that parrot position. They don't believe that the change is right. And so the challenge then isn't to convince them how to get on board and how to drive it forward. The challenge is to convince them that this is actually the right thing to do first, before you can drive forward with them. And you're absolutely right. There comes a point where actually we have decided that as an organization, this is the way that we're going to go. This is what has to be. And if you're not on board with that, then we need to look at perhaps a parting of the ways. And that can be a tough thing, as you know, from an organizational leadership perspective. It's a tough thing from a personal perspective. And I know I've certainly been in situations in organizations where my role and my approach and the way I was tackling things stopped being the right thing for me and for the organization. And therefore, it was time to make that change and move on to something different. But again, it comes back to Steph's point about, if we're making that decision for ourselves and we've got control, that's one thing. If somebody else is making that decision for us and is asking us to step away from the organization, that's a very different answer. So I feel I've waffled enough and really failed to answer that objectively for you, but yeah, joking apart, it is a really tough one. But the answer is that, yeah, there does come a point where if you're in that leadership position, you've got to draw that line in the sand. But we try and get them to buy in first, and we try and help them through that process. And that's where the models can be useful, but ultimately they've got to want the same things, and that can be the crux of it. Fraser.
You kind of sort of answered my question. Answered my question. That. I was just reflecting on I think in life, well, things you do and change. I think it depends. I gave up something I was doing, which a part of it was a lockdown project, but I kind of did it, and I decided to pass it on to somebody, and I realised. But I think it was more what it was. I basically set up an online radio station, and it was just a lockdown project because I do podcasting, and I kind of just said, like, the reason why I had to sort of give it up partly was I didn't have the resources. I recognised I didn't have the resources to take it any further forward. Two, I had to ditch it, but it was partially because one change when you're talking about the wording, because I've got mild kidney cancer, which is one of the changes I had to sort of knock on the head. But anyway, apart from that, but when you've got a setup, and if you're giving something, just getting rid of it for free, and you've got all the resources there, and the person you're handing it to, and you realise, listen, you've got everything on a plate there, but they rip it up and they completely, then they create, why reinvent the wheel in certain things? But if you've got the resources to take something forward, obviously that I don't, go for it. Because I passed this on to somebody, and they literally they had a website, they had this and this, but they didn't want this, didn't want that. So the URL expired, and then they didn't want to take the URL. So somebody else bought the URL, they missed the boat, and they literally have to now start again from something that was already there. I'm thinking, okay, and you're a coach, and they're a business coach. And I'm thinking, you're a business coach, and you just had everything on a plate. And I was like, you're just like nuts. So but I think it's just realizing your limits, realizing, yeah, you not everything will fit your business model. Like you'll have to sort of knock it on the head, get rid of it. You will have to change something, and you will have to go in a different direction, or you just, because you don't have the resources, and just, it's all about trying things in life and business. That's what it's about. And not everything will work. And some things will work, and you go from there,
Yeah, you used the phrase "miss the boat," so that gives me the opportunity to shoehorn my ship back in again. But it can be useful. So we can use that again as a model to help us analyze the situation and say, right, okay, so what's our destination? Where do we want to get to? And as you say, it might be that actually you feel you've got part of the answer already. So if we can create that common ground around this is what we want to achieve. This is the destination that we're trying to get to. This is our end point. Okay, how are we going to get there? Right, if that's going to be our direction of travel, what are the elements that we're going to need? What are the answers there? And it can help us to use that, say, right, if that's the answer, how can we get on board with this? And if you're not on board, is it because you think you've got a better idea? And if not, will that answer it? And if it does, is that the lever that will move you from being that kind of refuse Nick kind of cargo position to get you on board with it, if we can address that kind of common goal? And that kind of comes back to Amy's point as well around, we need the common goal first of all. It's the same as, we talked about some political examples of this. The problem that I think the Conservative Party's got at the minute is that they're all pulling in different directions, which is probably the case with most political parties. It's a coalition of very different opinions. But unless the party has got a single destination and a single way of going about it, then those divisions are going to keep pulling people apart. So it's about getting people on board enough to make progress. And you're right, it's about defining what you want to do first of all. And if you haven't got that bit in place first, then people will shoot off in different directions rather than addressing the change together. John, I see your hand going up.
Amazing. Dave, I'm curious, when is the best time? I mean, we talk about change kind of while things are already happening and then potentially people resisting change. When is the best time to get you involved? Is it like before the change project happens? Or, I suppose it would be in different. I suppose there's two scenarios. One is change happening to an organization. The other one is deliberate change that the organization is making. And each of those cases, when's the best time to get you involved?
To get me involved?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say both, obviously. It's always, so I've done both, and I've been involved. So I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot here. So What I found more interesting on a personal level is when I've got involved when things are in a bit of a mess. But that's just because it's really interesting then, and you've got all those things to unpick, and it just makes it a really, I like solving problems, I like challenges, and that's a more interesting challenge to get your team into. So on a personal level, I would probably enjoy that a little bit more. However, I would say that that's not the best way to go about it from the perspective of an organization, or certainly not from a perspective of people within an organization. And the more we can lay the groundwork, first of all, and the more involvement, because that's the success point about control. The more control people have got in a process before it kicks in, and the more they feel involved in the process, the more they feel got an element of agency in that process, the more engaged they're going to be in the outcome. As Fraser and Amy as well, we've got people engaged then in the outcome because they've been involved in the process building up to it. Whereas if it's simply going in and trying to address things after the fact, it's not, you've already got people alienated, you've already got people scared, you've already got people on that negative change curve. You're not giving people a chance to buy into that positive change. So the best practice, sooner rather than later, because then you can start to lay that groundwork and give people the opportunity to buy into it. But yeah, it's fascinating when things are at that kind of challenging level as well. The answer is it's never too late as well. You know, there's always a way, you know, there's always an opportunity to get people back into a process as long as you've got the willingness to do it. And I know I've got some ex-colleagues on the call here who weren't involved in that process and didn't get the opportunity to get bought in. And that's even more painful. Fraser, I'm not sure if that's your hand up again or if it's just lingering. Oh, no. Okay. I mean, I've got a couple of other bits and pieces I'll just cover off, guys, but is there anything else that people wanted to raise or ask about or explore in terms of change? Oh, good. Okay, so as I said, I'm working with John and Sue and Kim and the team. They'll follow up if there's any further support that I've kind of got on offer. And firstly is this webinar series. And so we'll send information out on that with the slides from today. So I think at the moment we've got about 10 topics lined up. That might get longer. We might add more to it. We might adapt it as we go. But essentially we're going to be running a webinar once a fortnight and until we're all done great, John. I think that was the plan.
Fantastic. I mean, essentially, I've known Dave quite a while now, a good couple of years now, and I just thought Dave's content is too great to be hidden away. Like we need to get it out there, Dave. So we're just basically helping unleash Dave, and there's a contact and allowing more, you know, kind of contact points for you guys to be able to, you know, ask questions, you know, learn from him, and ultimately just be able to, you know, get help. So that's essentially what we're doing. And yeah, and we'll handle all the admins so that Dave can do his thing.
I like change, but I'm now slightly nervous about being unleashed. We'll see where we get to. But yeah, we're going to be running webinars once a fortnight for, well, we're not setting an end date. So, you know, when we run through the program, we'll, you know, rinse and repeat, and we'll go again. So feel free to jump onto any and all of those. The list of topics will be coming out with the slides from today. If there's any weeks that you can't make, we're going to record the sessions and send out the recordings afterwards. So feel free just to register, and then you get the recording. Two other options. One was really my response to change when we hit lockdown. I've been training and coaching for quite a number of years now, and up until lockdown hit, my operating model was to stand in a room and talk to people, and that stopped very, very quickly. And it's starting to pick up again now, but obviously I went through that, oh my God, this is terrible, what am I going to do? Had my low point, right, I'm going to do this is my reaction, how hard can it be? Turned out it was very hard. Turned out my initial pivot didn't work, and so I went down, checked out, and came back up again. So I've been up and down these change curves quite a bit. What I've created, I'll share my screen again just to let you guys see it, is an online, effectively an online training platform. So this is effectively a digital in-house training team. So we cover a number of topics. These are all the topics that are currently available, and a number of these we're covering, in elements of in the webinar series. And then there's further topics that we are developing just now, some of which we've already got webinars designed for. So I need to pull my finger out and get the videos completed. So it works as a digital in-house training team. So it's there for an organization to bring in and use to support people to develop their resilience, their productivity, their effectiveness as teams, as an organization. It works on a subscription model. My aim with the site is to support a large number of organizations, recognizing that there's significant challenge going forward, but also recognizing that the capacity and the resources that many organizations have got to meet these challenges is very limited. So this will work if it scales. It's done at a very low, affordable level for organizations. So there's a one-off sign-up fee, and then to access this for up to 50 people in an organization is just £25 a month. So it's that kind of sort of Netflix type model where it's low cost but huge value in order to try and support as many organizations as possible. And the third option, if there's more beyond that would be useful, is to look at embedded training. And that's when we get together and you tell me all the things and the challenges and the issues that you're trying to address. And we put together a training program that's bespoke and just for what you're looking for. So those are all the options. I'm not particularly pushing anything. Well, I am obviously, but I'm not ramming the point home. We send all the information out. If it's right for you, you'll go for it. If it's not, you won't. That's fine. It really is just about, as John said, it's putting the information out there, putting the opportunities out there for organizations and for individuals, and you guys will pick up what's useful for you. So I will leave it over with you. So I'm going to stop recording at this point.